And I'm like, yo, I can't do anything here. And then they'll come about, and then Sebastian will throw me a bone. So Tony, I'm like, yo, don't ask me no questions.
Welcome back to another episode of Nerds and Rounds, guys. Another COVID edition. It's your host, Sebastian.
Your boy, Law.
And your boy, Tone, from across the hall.
And today we have with us the awesome podcast team of...
I'm Jorge, the Dreamer Medina.
And I'm Sam, the Crazy Man Vera.
Nice.
And Nerds
is excited to have... smooth, right?
Yo, that went very smooth.
Sam, the Crazy Man Vera.
Normally that takes like 10 takes.
Yeah.
It's never that smooth.
Really?
Well, just to let our listeners know,
all the time.
This is the Catch Da Craze team from Catch Da Craze podcast. I want to congratulate you guys because by the time this come out, you guys have launched your 200th episode.
That's right.
How does that feel?
Yes. Oh, dude.
Crazy.
It's insane. It's insane that we got 200 in the can already.
Yeah, it's nuts, but it's also a good feeling too.
Yeah.
So how did that journey to 200 start?
The journey to Catch Da Craze. Well,
who made the first move? That's always the best way to ask is who made the first move and who said like, yo, you want to do this?
No, Sam, we've been doing this show for years, right? Sam, go ahead, tell them.
Yeah, we started 10 years ago. So when we started Catch Da Craze podcast, we were one in just a handful. And it was part of when we started, it was a movement, it was a culture. And we had a huge following, and we hosted indie after parties at New York Comic Con. And, we had tons of guests, and it took off. And then we broke away from everything, and I disappeared, and I was in a cell in Iraq for a while, and I finally escaped and made my way back to the U.S. and hooked up with George, and I was like, actually, George and I were talking back in spring.
Yeah, because my sister was moving, and I had a bunch of stuff in the basement, and I had some big cutouts of one of his characters back then. I was like, yo, Sam, I'm about to throw this stuff out. Do you want it? And he was like, yeah, I want it. So we went back and forth, and he was like, yeah, when can I go drop it off? Sam had just moved. So I ended up at his house one day, and yo, dude, we started talking, reminiscing about the old days, and it was a wrap. Sam was like, right, Sam?
Yeah, that was it. And the spark was rekindled, and the Dreamer and the Crazy Man said, let's just do this. And so, the industry's changed, from when we did it, if you listen to our shows, we talked about some of the tools we used back then, from big camcorders and, just very primitive ways of doing things. Yeah. And so everything changed now, and, you have the webcams and, you can do the simplest form by just picking up your camera and just doing a podcast, or you can be as crazy as I am and going a little extreme with the tools and the technology. And so I went back and did my homework, invested in the tools, and we launched our first episode in September of last year. And we're going to be anniversarying that 1 year back in the game. And what we found was the chemistry was always there, but the market changed, the people changed, and so we needed to adjust and figure out where we fit in where we were big fish in a pond. Now we're guppies in a massive ocean, and so like, all right, how do we fit, and how do we keep our voice and our message the same, but adjust to the time and the people in the industry, because so much has changed, and there's so much. We were talking about it earlier this evening about the trends on YouTube and social media. So, but we didn't change who we are and what we love to do, and we like to support the indie community. So it's just been growing because of that, and we just didn't change our DNA.
Nah, yo, sometimes honestly, like we were interviewing somebody right now, and I know like Sam comes from like corporate, and when he's asking questions, sometimes, dude, I'm like, yo, I hope this kid gets the job. Like,
oh yeah,
it's like a job interview, bro. I'm like, yo, this kid is going in on that question. So you said that, blah 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 blah. Like, wow.
Because George will ask a question, but then there's a missing element to that question. I'm like, no, you're letting him off the hook, right? So I'm like, wait, hold on.
Get him.
It's always fun. Like like I know for me, like I try to find I try to get like one good question in, or my question to be more like research based. Like I'll look through like your Instagram and all this other stuff like while we're talking, like just whipping. So one of our earlier episodes before Law became an official member, we had Seabass's boy Pete Rosado on. He's really big into wrestling, so we decided to do an episode of wrestling and comics. And I know Seabass is into wrestling. Like I know because when I first hung out with Seabass, we were drinking beers and watching wrestling. I'm not like a big wrestling head. Like I don't got the knowledge. Like you ask me Game of Thrones shit, I can go back years and decades of shit that wasn't even shown on TV. Wrestling, like I go as far as like I can talk about like The Rock, Stone Cold, and that's about it. We have Pete come on, and Pete's talking, and I'm like, they are so ingrained in wrestling, and I'm like, yo, I can't do anything here. And then they'll come about, and then Sebastian will throw me a bone. So Tony, I'm like, yo, don't ask me the questions. Don't ask me to contribute to this. I'm gonna sound like that kid that didn't study for the test. Or he'll be like, oh, so he's like, oh, he was like, oh, what like wrestler or what wrestling trope do you want to see in comics? I'm like, tropes? Oh man, like I barely know face and heel. Like, can we stop?
Prior to the show, you guys obviously have worked in the indie comics. You went there, Big Apple Comic Con, swinging out there with those books, big superstars. Share with us the concept that you guys had created that you were selling at Big Apple Comic Con.
Mine was Cosmic Wars. It was a sci-fi fantasy story. When you think the style, it was like you take Fraggle Rock and Star Wars and you mix them together, and that was, and the way I did it was part 3D generated and hand illustration. So all of the characters were hand illustrated, but all the backgrounds were 3D image that I created on computer, and I merged the two and made sure that the lighting, everything matched. So that was something I created when I was a kid, and it was Cosmic Gorf, and then it became Cosmic Wars, and that was my book. And then George had.
I had Russ 5377. So I drew that book. I drew, colored it, did everything on it. I did the lettering and everything on it. It was actually the first time I had actually used 11 by 17 pieces of paper to draw comics in. Like before I met Sam, I was drawing on like 8.5 by 11, folding them in half, and those were my comics. So that was like the first book that I actually like produced on a computer, colored in Photoshop, and did all of that for. So that's what we had. I had Russ 5377 #1, and then Sam had the Cosmic Wars. Didn't we have? We ended up doing a book called Genesis. And it was like a Bible of all of our characters. It was like their background stories, good guys, bad guys. Like it was like almost like a Marvel, universe book. But we called ours Genesis, and it had all of our characters. Yeah, it was like a magazine style book. That wasn't at the first show though, right?
I think we did that at the end of the first year.
Yeah, we put everything together in one book. We had trading cards too. We created trading cards.
We had everything. We had posters, trading cards, shirts, hats. Pins. The collector's edition of There's an Alien in My Toilet, where you got the doll, the book, the trade paperback, and it was limited, and we were selling this at cons. It was my own character.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Oh.
I
still have the...
that is super above and beyond. Like, I'm going to...
So, George, you got the new book that's been picked up by Barnes & Noble's, Wonder Duck. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Wonder Duck was something I created back many, many years ago, back in the 90s. Back in the days, I was a big fan of the Disney Afternoon. DuckTales was like my big thing. I love DuckTales. And there was this one character in DuckTales called Gizmo Duck. And I was like, yo, dude, I got to have my own Gizmo Duck. So I created Wonder Duck. So I actually created that character back in the 90s. And then I redesigned them as I went along. And finally, I met up with J.M. DeSantis. I'm sure you guys know him. And he started a company called Dark Fire Press. And I was like, hey, are you picking up independent books to publish. And he was, and he said, dude, if you want, I'll pick up Wonder Dog. I can put it out there for you. And I had just, we had just gotten back, and Sam and I were working on the show. So I was like, you know what, rather than hustle and bustle the whole book and do all of that stuff, because I want to do some stuff, do the Catch Da Craze stuff, I was like, let's do it. So signed a contract, and sure enough, man, he got it in. It's in Barnes and Nobles now. It's on Amazon. The story's about a duck who is an out of work actor, and it's kind of dark. He is thinking of ending it all. He's going to jump into the water and kill himself, but he's a duck, so he won't drown. And all of a sudden, something comes from out of space him right in the head, and he becomes Wonder Dog. Now, the whole story behind it is that in another planet, there's a war going on, and the scientist who created the costume is actually being charged of treason because he's going against his own people, and he created this suit to kind of attack them. And so that's what kind of the story takes off, and Wonder Dog just becomes the superhero who's out to protect the galaxy from all evildoers everywhere. Simple premise, but it's about the story in itself, and I had fun writing it, and I'm actually working on the second part of it now. So
nice.
Hopefully that'll be out by next October.
So to our young viewers out there, our viewers who are looking to get into podcasting, independent comics, just by what you guys have gone through, what advice would you like to lay out there for those looking to go down this route?
I think it's first understand your why, right? So why do you want to do it? What are you looking to get from it? What are your no's? What are you not willing to do? So I think what happens is there's a lot of clout chasers and there's a lot of trend chasers, right? And so people are looking to capitalize on what's trending. If that's what you want to do, then go for it. If you're looking to make your own path, understand that there's a lot of work and sacrifice in the back end. So I would suggest is reach out to other podcasters, educate yourself, find your niche and your voice, but also know that if you're going to do this, it's going to require time, money, sacrifice, and it's a grind. And if you're just looking to just do something and have fun, you're not going to build an audience. You're not going to get credibility. If you really want to build a brand and you are your brand, or if you're doing it because you want to sell something, then be consistent with it, but understand your audience. I think that's what I did when George and I decided to do it in spring. I was studying again the game that I started in, and I had to re-educate myself and understand all the differences in technology, in streaming, in platforms, which is going to be better for our message, understanding the market. It's a lot of work. Once you understand your why and what you're not willing to do, because if you have, I said it before, if your list of nots are greater than your wills, don't waste your time. Because you should, I will do this, I can do this, should be multiple pages compared to I can't do this because. The moment you have anything that's going to, if you have a back out plan, don't do it. If it's a hobby, don't waste your time and just study before you launch, and then try it out and work out the kinks, because there's a lot of technical issues that you're not planning for that's going to come up. The next stage of Catch Da Craze is going to be a comic book. And so, it's funny how you said that about comics. So Catch Da Craze, you've been seeing what level of crazy are you? My promotions on how crazy are you? Are you hyper crazy? But those crazies are characters. And so that are in the book. And the book is about George and I, and it's about the two guys that started out podcasting 10 years ago, and they were the buzz, the craze, and then they walked away, same thing. Come back years later and nothing's happening. And they're working and they're doing shows and they're not getting any traction, and the crazy man goes into the woods and shouts out to the universe, help us be popular. And then that's how the crazy man, I don't know if you've seen the skits with the Afro guy. The videos with the crazy man, and my alter ego. Well, he comes and appears, and he's going to help us start the craze, and then it just takes off, and these little critters come out of nowhere.
He releases a bunch of crazies into the world.
Crazies, and they start bopping people in the head, and they become zombies listening to Catch Da Craze, and then no one understands what's happening, and people walking around aimlessly just listening to headsets and watching their phones. And then we get interrogated by the FBI, and it takes off from there. So, and then we have to stop the craze. we have to catch the Crazees. We're going to have a membership program, and you can actually buy a Crazee as your icon as a support. So it's going to be on our Patreon. So there's going to be a lot of things. So we're excited about this. There's a whole lot of different characters that come out of it. George goes into the woods when we need to try to stop the Crazees, and he shouts out, and then the Dreamers show up. So it's gonna be crazy.
I am with it.
It'll be crazy. Characters are pretty hot. They walk around with microphones and they bop people over the head. You can't see them, but we can see them, right? So we're like, oh, we think we're going crazy, and we're on a stakeout trying to catch them, and it's a whole crazy world.
If you guys were approached by any of the studios to make a story of Catch Da Craze into a movie, who would you guys like to play you?
Oh, that's a good one.
Damn.